special edition.
Oh, and it doesn't get any more special than this, JT. How good is our guest today? The great Wayne Wetherall, mate. This man has invented more trekking companies than I've had shoe changes. Fair income, like he's all over it. There's nowhere he hasn't gone, and wherever he's been that has been amazing, we're about to find out about it. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the one and only Wayne Wetherall.
Woo-hoo! Thanks, Donnie. How cool is that?
Mate, it's bloody good to have you here with JT and myself to have a look at your life, and because ultimately, mate, you are an adventurer and your life is an adventure. So let's go back to the start. What was your first big trek that really opened your eyes to say, hey, I want to do more of this?
Mate, it was Kokoda, and well, probably pre that, I'd actually went into Vietnam, and it all started because I've just got this passion for the Australian story, what the Australian character is all about. And I'd been down in Vung Town in Vietnam, and some of the guys are talking about this incredible story called Kokoda. And I said, what's that all about? I said, I didn't know much about Kokoda, and it's one of the most incredible stories in Australia's history. And for me, it's sort of the fundamentals of what drives me forward. And I did my first trek across Kokoda in 2004, and it was one of the most life-changing. It was an epiphany happened to me halfway across the track, and I was sitting at Brigade Hill, and I've just gone like, how come I don't know about this most extraordinary story of young men, with their backs against the wall, overcoming a ferocious enemy that was hell-bent on stealing our land and changing our lives forever. So it changed me. It changed me back in 2004, and it became my passion and my purpose to tell the Australian story, to tell the story about the boys that fought on Kokoda and their Fuzzy Wuzzy brothers. So yeah, it's an incredible story.
And Wayne, I'll be really honest. I'm comforted to hear you say you didn't know anything about Kokoda before doing it, because I was the same. I'd listened to a book, the Kokoda, Peter Fitzsimon's book, and I honestly, up until then, I had no idea of the significance of the Kokoda campaign. And so hearing you say that you were a novice, and of course, I've learnt most of my stuff about Kokoda from you. So it's a really refreshing thing. Can you take us back to that Brigade Hill? Obviously that's a monumental battle, but that experience of landing in Papua New Guinea and then beginning your first trek, what was it like for you? Do you remember your very first one?
Absolutely, mate. And that's one of the things that when I lead treks across Kokoda now, I actually remember what it's like to be the first time trekker. I remember flying into Port Moresby, and I expected this place to be a tropical paradise, with the palm trees everywhere and the girls in the hula outfits and stuff like that. But I flew into Port Moresby. It was dry. There was fires burning. There was smoke all over the place from burning off their fires, their plantations and things like that. And, I remember I was in Port Moresby for a couple of days beforehand because I wanted to have a look around. And it was just the most incredible experience of walking through the streets of Port Moresby and just hanging with the locals there and just getting to know the place. But, the trepidation of going across Kokoda, more than 100 kilometres across the track, more than 6,000 metres of ups and 6,000 metres of downs in the middle of the jungle. And the only way out of Kokoda is to walk out, or if you're lucky, to get a helicopter in. So the trepidation is it's big, and I knew I'd done a lot of training, a lot of preparation, but you're thinking to yourself, have I done enough to get across this range there, And when you're standing there at Owers Corner and you look across at the jungles and the mountains of the Owen Stanley Ranges, it becomes quite apparent that you're in for a mighty big adventure here, and the only way to go is to take that first step and keep going. And I've got a funny story about my very first trek on Kokoda from Owers Corner, Donnie, where we started. I think we started all the other way. We went there.
We went in first, yep.
In the first 3 meters of stepping off Owers Corner, I fell off the track. And I thought I'd broken my leg. I actually seriously thought 3 meters, because back then the grass was so high then, you can only see the track was only like 6 inches wide. And I've actually stepped off and I've gone down, I've gone, oh my God, it's over. So months and months and months of preparation and training was almost out the window in the first 3 steps. But back in those days, mate, too, you didn't start at Owers Corner. The roads were so bad back in 2004 that the buses couldn't get past. So we actually had to walk 15 k's further in to start the adventure, and because that's as far as the buses could get. So, we're well and truly warmed up before I got to Owen's Corner. But, that first step off the, out into the jungle was like, that's it, I'm gone. How am I going to tell people about my greatest failure, So, but I actually understand how people feel, that first part of looking out there, you're going like, hey, this is just an astonishing. And what brings me back, Donnie, I just think, what would have been like for those young men, for those soldiers, not knowing what was in front of them. Because back in those days, hardly anybody had walked across the track. Here I was going to walk the track, and I've got the most experienced guides and the most experienced carriers in the business with me. But back then, the Australian soldiers were, had some phenomenal leaders and, Captain Sam Templeton and things like that. But they didn't know what they didn't know what to expect. And they clearly didn't know where the enemy was. So, you just put yourself back in perspective and you go, wow, this is just I know when my trek's going to finish. Those young men who fought back there in 1942 didn't know if they were coming back or when they were coming back.
So when you said when you first did it, you had the epiphany halfway through that it was like, wow, no one knows this story. Was that the motivation behind, turning this into a business for yourself to educate more people about Kokoda, or was it the mental and physical challenge part of it? Like, what was the big driver? Because to decide to set up your own company and change the direction of your life's a big move to make. So it must have been pretty compelling.
Yeah, it's certainly compelling. It certainly was the story, because back there in 2004, there was hardly anyone walking the track. There'd been some trekking companies that were, had been walking beforehand. But, I don't know, there could have been 1,500 people walk Kokoda maybe that year. But so it's not one of those cracking business. It was just a cracking business idea. I'm going to make $1 million out of it. So there was nothing to do with financial gain out of this. It was actually just the story. I'm going, as a very proud Australian, how come I don't know this most incredible story, of young men, with their backs against the wall. And it was an Australian battle. There was no Americans, there was no New Zealanders. It was just young men. It was just militia who were, holding back an enemy. And the thing that also inspired me was the sentence of the Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels, the porters and carriers and guides that were women. I thought, I've an opportunity to try and change their lives as well here. So for me, it was never a financial situation. It was about going, I want to be able to tell this strange story, and I want to make a difference to the people of Papua New Guinea as well. Because without their service and sacrifice of their forebears, their fathers and grandfathers, we wouldn't have had the success that we did had on Kokoda. So it was really about making a difference. It was about, I'd found my passion in life. I'd found my purpose in life, and I wanted to do something significant.
And how did you go then, mate? Was it I know you're researched better than most people I know in terms of the stories and the understanding. Now, you didn't get your research just from reading books. You went out of your way to meet diggers, families, and to find out. Can you tell us a bit about some of those experiences?
Yeah, I think to speak to the guys who actually served on the Kokoda track was certainly extremely spiritual and very, very moving. And one of the questions we'd ask these guys, are you okay with us walking the Kokoda track with Kokoda Trail? Because, the name varies between track and trail. And because let's be honest, it's a commercial venture and we're walking in their footsteps. And say, Wayne, we want you to tell the story. We want you to tell the story of our mates and our brothers who never came home. And I had the honour to meet, more than a dozen, probably 20 of the veterans who fought on Kokoda. Stan Bissett being one of them, and his brother Butch had died at the Battle of Isarava. And for years and years and years, I kept up with Stan. He said, Wayne, can you please, next time you go to Port Moresby, check on Butch's grave and just make sure it's clean. And then I'd go back and I'd report to Stan. Here's a man who lost his brother, back in 1942. And, for all these years later, he lived his life to honour his brother and things like that. So it's an incredible story of meeting these diggers. But you know what, Donnie, they look into your eyes and they touch your soul. And it can be really unnerving when these guys who have fought the most ferocious battles in Australia's history look in you and they're trying to work you out if you're a decent guy or not, or if they should talk to you. It's quite confronting, and to see these guys, because that they have walked through hell, and they have seen things that no men should see, and when they look at you and they talk to you, and it takes a while for them to trust you. Once they start trusting you and telling them the story, it is the most incredible experience to be able to talk and work with them. And I also had unique experience to also talk to a number of Japanese veterans who fought on the track. And it's really important to understand, whilst this is a cracking, a strange story, and the Japanese were there as well, and so were our Papua New Guinean brothers. And, I had many times I met up with Nishimura, who was the bowman of Kokoda, who came back to find his dead mates and to give them decent burials and things like that. I'd met him 4 times. I've been on the track with him, and also been back and down to Popondetta, where he set up his workshops and that kind of stuff. But to talk to a Japanese veteran and to know what they went through as well, and the hardships that everybody went through on this track is really quite it's an emotional experience to talk to any digger, because they get sent to war by their governments. They don't choose to go there, and they're told to go and fight. They're told to go and fight an enemy. And someone like Nishimura used to tell me the stories like Wayne. He respected the Australian soldiers so much. For him, it was like going to sport. It was like, but the sport was killing each other. It was such an incredible experience to talk to these diggers. And, unfortunately, there's only a couple of them left now. And that's why telling this story is so important, to keep the memory and the spirit of these guys, because these guys are what the Australian character is all about. You meet these diggers, you meet these guys who've gone before us, that mateship, the courage, endurance, mateship, and sacrifice. And that's what those words mean. And you just really know that you've found the essence of what the Australian character and what the Australian spirit's all about when you meet these guys. And that is why it's so important to myself, and probably I'd say, the majority of other trekking companies out there, to continue to tell the story of these young men who now, are in their 90s and getting close to 100 of their sacrifices, mate, because it is the true Australian story, and as I said, the essence of the Australian character.
It's very easy to hear the passion that comes through in your voice, and you're right. When someone finds their purpose in life, everything just sort of gels together, and it's clearly doing that for you. I think you're up to, what is it, number 95 treks now of Kokoda.
Yes, yeah, it would have been. We would have knocked over the ton, mate. So I'm stuck in the nervous 90s now. I'm a little bit worried about getting that up. I just hope, that the 100th will come up next year, because I'd hate to be like doing a Donny Bradman, mate, and my average will be 99 point something, and not complete the task there, mate.
Mate, I've got every confidence you're going to get to the ton. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Kokoda and the challenge around doing the actual track or trail itself, but it's not just Kokoda. Now, your business has branched out in a couple of other sort of areas or countries. You want to tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, mate, we actually also go into Borneo. We go into Sabah, Borneo, which is one of the most incredible stories in Australia's history as well. It's another war story, but it's a POW story. And it's a story it's been, basically untold in Australia's history as well. It's called the Sandakan Death March, and there's more than 2,600 Australian and British POWs held in a POW camp in Sandakan in Sabah, Borneo in late 1945. And, as the war started to turn against the Japanese, they had 3 death marches to move the POWs from Sandakan into the middle of Borneo to a place called Renown. And, out of the 1,700 odd, POWs who were in the POW camp at that time, only 6 survived.
Wow.
So it's... over the 3 death marches. So, and the only way those guys survived was by escaping. The Japanese had brutalised the POWs. Prior to that, they had starved them. So these guys were down to skin and bone, and they'd forced them to carry heavy loads, more than 260 odd Ks through the heaviest jungles of Borneo. And one of the sad stories about this as well is that they engaged the head guides of Borneo to cut a track. And the guides actually thought they would cut the track for the Japanese transportation. So they cut it in the most difficult and most inhospitable terrain, but they're not realising the POW is going to be walking across this track. So, it's a very spiritual walk there as well, to know that so many Australian soldiers had perished out there with no known graves still. It's an amazing story. It's different to Kokoda. No fighting battles took place there. But just once again, the essence of the Australian spirit, supporting their mates, the courage, that mateship, and looking after each other on that journey there. So it's the worst military tragedy of World War II for Australians. Google it, look it up, the Sandakan Death March. That we go there, twice a year. And what's really sad about the Death March as well, when the war ended, in August 1945, and there was still, a number of Australian soldiers still alive in Renau and one of the other POW camps, but the Japanese murdered them after the war had finished. So, we were so close to getting dozens and dozens and dozens of these Australian soldiers home. Fortunately, we didn't, and only 6 survived. So, and the other places we go to is Nepal, which is an incredible journey up to the roof of the world, up to Everest Base Camp, Annapurna Circuit, Island Peak. I'd have to say Everest and Nepal is certainly one of my favourite destinations there. It's such a place of great beauty. The contrast between the mountains and the blue sky is something to behold. It is the most spectacular land on earth for me, and just the fact that you're mixing with the local people there and their calm way of life is something to behold. It's such a very spiritual journey to be walking towards the roof of the world, and to be doing it with such beautiful people as well. So I like to try and get there at least once a year to and we take some incredible groups over there. We take lots of charity groups there. We've had some amazing people come to Everest Base Camp with us. It's certainly an adventure. It certainly has some challenges there. We've certainly had some challenges in the past there, with altitude sickness and things like that. So it's certainly, from an adventure point of view, it certainly puts people right out of their comfort zones. And that's what I love, having people outside their comfort zone. And that's where you get the transformation from people. There's no transformation inside your comfort zone. There's no transformation sitting at home watching, National Geographic. The real changes in your life, the real benefits you're going to get from life is getting out there amongst these adventures and seeing, how far you can push yourself, changing the benchmark, pushing yourself to new limits. Kilimanjaro is certainly one of the other ones that we partake about, which is the highest mountain in Africa, at nearly 6,000 meters. It's certainly one of the big challenging mountains of the world, and certainly when the weather comes in. We were out there this time last year with the Mark Hughes Foundation and Trent Robinson, the Roosters coach, and we had blizzard conditions on top of the mountains. We had thunderstorms and lightning and things like that. And you do question yourself, why am I out here on this mountain exposed to lightning and thunderstorms and blizzards? Because that's where life is. Life is on the edge of the mountain, and that's the only way to live your life is by pushing yourself past your preconceived limitations and then stretching your boundaries.
So you spend most of your year now, obviously, well, not when COVID's around anyway, out and seeing the world and doing the treks and the trails. What do you find now? Because it's a business for you as well. What do you find is the motivation for people that sign up? Is it for the life-changing journey, or is it for the physical challenge, or sort of all of the above? What drives people to fork out the money and pay you to take them on a trek?
Mate, certainly, there's a few reasons. Certainly, Kokoda, is seen as this ultimate challenge. People are looking to push themselves, especially when they get to Donnie's age and stuff like that. They're starting to look like, they want to see if they've still got it. A lot of people want to go and do these challenges to see if they've still what it takes to make it happen. That they're no longer the young person, the young lady, but they want to challenge themselves. They want to get back to this tribal feel. They want to actually get out there and just know that they can test themselves one more time. So a lot of it's testing. And what you find with something like Kokoda, people go there for the physical challenge, but then they get caught up in the cultural and they get caught up in the history, and it becomes so far more powerful. Something like Nepal and Everest Base Camp is a challenge. People want to go there and see where these guys, climb to the summit of Everest and things like that. So people are looking for challenges. People are looking to test themselves, looking at people getting back to nature, getting out of the concrete jungles, changing themselves. And you know what? One of the most incredible things you actually see people change. We get to deal with, elite sports people, to millionaires and CEOs and managing directors and all the high flyers of the world, but also, the ordinary Australians. And to see the change in people is incredible. To see people get back to their basics, get back to their core beliefs, which is really, really important. That's where you see the change. You see the people change and go, you know what? There's something more important in my life than trying to make $1 million or trying to do this. It's actually about being a better human, and that's where it is. That's where the joy comes with this kind of stuff. Being a better human, testing yourself, and going, having that peace and satisfaction of what you've achieved in your life.
Wayne, you talk about the nature, and of course on your website, www.kokodaspirit.com.au, there is some cracking photos of nature at its finest, like literally living jungles, not the I'm a celebrity, get me out of here caper, but it's the real deal. Do you ever have time in your treks to just stop and appreciate, so to switch off as Wayne the trek guide, and just come back to Wayne Wetherall human and just take it all in? Do you have that opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I make sure I do that. And you know what, just saying that now, and one of the things that I've had a chance to reflect during COVID is perhaps I didn't do that enough, Donnie. Perhaps I didn't do that enough on the journey. Maybe perhaps I took the fact that I was walking across Kokoda, as my rite of passage, as my right to be doing this, and I'm going to be doing it forever. But to stop in COVID, I've actually been reflecting in my mind those moments on the track, and the simple things of looking at a tree, looking up and seeing, like 75 years ago, you can still see bullet holes, that kind of stuff like that. Swimming in the river, listening to the kids laugh on the track and things like that. Watching them kick a soccer ball, they've got nothing, but seeing the sheer joy of people. Yeah, so for me, it really is. You've got to stop and reflect and look and just go, wow, because it's time to stop and go. You look around and go, wow, I haven't seen that. And I love taking photos. I take the photos inside in my mind, but I also take a million photos on my camera, because you just look at this and just go, this is a moment in time, and it just gets etched in your mind. And it's more than just a picture; it's actually a feeling of being this place. And I do a lot of visualization, and I visualize, how each day is going to look, how each trip's going to look, and what the place looks like. So I spend a lot of time looking and touching, and it seems a bit greenish and a bit spiritual, like touching the tree, feeling the energy of the place. Because something like Kokoda, the energy that comes out of Kokoda, when you've got to consider that there's still hundreds of Australian and Papua New Guinea and Japanese soldiers still out there. So it's such a spiritual thing on these journeys. So you can't help but stop and reflect and feel these places and stuff like that. So pretty amazing.
Now, mate, I'm only 92 treks away from you in terms of crossings of Kokoda. So, I mean, we're same really. Yeah. But
and it's good because I'm looking to recruit guides next year too, mate. So, depends how your podcast goes. I'm going to get going for you next year.
Can I do that from a helicopter?
It's got a bit of capacity, I reckon.
But I tell you what, the first time I went, mate, I went over with an amazing group of humans. It was with a corporate group, and Mick and Tim and Nick. It was a ripping adventure. And I must admit, the second time I went, I had this feeling of almost being a facilitator, watching other people have those wow moments. It was a completely different experience for me the second time. 94 in, is it a different experience for you every time, or do you still have deja vu? What is it like for you?
Mate, I can tell you, even sitting here talking to you guys now, I still have the tingles. I had the tingles because you just see people, you see people's emotion. You cannot help being affected by Kokoda. Kokoda is the journey, mate, and watching people shed a tear, watching people overcome, the hardships and sickness and toughness and terrain and, the heat and all that kind of stuff. It can't help but affect you, mate. And to stand there at Brigade Hill, and you've been there, mate, there's, more than 101 Australian soldiers lost their life at Brigade Hill and Mission Ridge. You cannot help to feel the spirit and the energy of this place. So to answer your question, mate, every single trek I get affected. Every single trek, you're with a different bunch of people, and you're watching and you're seeing the changes, and that just gives you great joy. Because for me, it's not a commercial venture. It's actually watching people change and grow and become better and get it. And for me, when people get the story of Kokoda, I've done my job, and I've honoured those guys who have gone before us, and I've honoured what I told people I was going to do. Telling the story with passion, purpose, and significance. It's the greatest satisfaction to be able to do that, mate. For people to actually get this story, and they'll go home and they'll tell other people about this story. So that's where the joy is. You cannot, every single trip, mate, I get affected, sometimes more than others. Sometimes I become very conscious of the fact that I probably should have done a bit more training. And as a guide, so sometimes as a guide, people don't want to know that you're undertrained. They don't know why are you sweating so much? Oh, it's just a bit hot, mate. So you've got to make sure every trip, it's not like a walk in the park. Sometimes, we suffer, and the guides suffer as much as everyone else does on the track there, except we don't show that as much because people don't want to know that your guide's struggling as well, So
now,
Wayne, sorry.
I'm asking this, mate, because as a trek leader, you obviously get to mix with a lot of different people. And as you said, you've got celebrity sports stars, CEOs, you name it. And then you also get some roughabouts like Don that goes along the trek. And I'm dying to know, because he really talked it up and said, mate, it was a breeze. I thought it was going to be a lot harder than what it was. And he did say that you were struggling a bit, but he found it pretty easy. I just wanted to hear from you. How do you reckon Donnie went on that first trek?
I don't know. I don't like to talk out of school there, but I'm not, the reason why it was so easy for Donnie, because he had so many porters. He had people,
they carried me.
Here we go.
Scratches and all sorts of stuff there, it was like, mate, he was sitting back like king. He was the king of Kokoda there, mate. Sitting on his stretcher going like, yes, slow it up, boys. Please, boys, not so rough, please. Porter, where's my water? That's Donnie, mate.
There we go. That's what I thought. Because I just thought, how can you claim that you've done the trek when you've literally been carried on a stretcher the whole way? I don't know if it's necessarily you've done the trek. Is there a distinction there?
Sorry, JT, you're breaking up, mate. We're probably going to have to wrap this up.
He was good, mate. I have to say, he suffered at the first. I can't remember if it was the first or second trek. He had a lot of trouble with
the stump leg. Yep.
The stump there, mate, and the shoe and stuff like that. So to go across with one leg is pretty amazing.
I was obviously taking the piss. It's an awesome effort, and he tried to con me into coming on.
I keep taking the piss because
I love taking. Obviously. Obviously with Don with one leg, it's obviously more challenging for someone that's got two legs. But what's the biggest challenge? I've heard of some people that have had some incredible physical challenges that have still put themselves through it. So aside from Donnie, have you had others on the group that just physically, like you go, wow, no chance?
We took the legendary Kurt Fearnley across the track in 2009.
With no legs at all, right? So
Kurt's got his legs, but they don't function there. So he crawled across the track from Kokoda to Owls Corner in 10 days.
Wait, can you just speak up, Wayne? Did you say Kurt crawled?
Kurt crawled.
The lazy little shit. Here's me walking. I actually rang him and I said, hey, mate, what you've done Kokoda, what can I expect? And this is his advice to me. He said, Donnie, just be ready to be uncomfortable and then be uncomfortable again at that, because that's what it's like. But now that I hear he crawled, geez,
I imagine doing push-ups. He's done push-ups the whole way across Kokoda.
Unbelievable.
I have to say, Donnie, your trip was pretty special. But to see Kurt Fearnley crawl across that is the most incredible story that I've ever seen. And he did it in the honour of one of our diggers, in the name of John Metzen, who crawled across the track for 3 weeks. That was Kurt's inspiration. Was one of the diggers who didn't want to be a burden to his mates. So he was wounded in the legs and things like that. And this guy crawled behind the medics and the sick people being carried, and crawled for 3 weeks to eventually lose his life. And that was Kurt's inspiration. If you ever want to find inspiration in your life, check out what Kurt Fearnley did across Kokoda, or check out someone like Johnny Metzen. So we've had people who have been blind walk across the track. We've had people with multiple disabilities. But where the great joy comes from is the ordinary Australian. The ordinary guy who's saved really, really hard, in his job to put the money together, because Kokoda's not cheap, to get there and to see them achieve a lifetime dream is something pretty special, So that's what I say, we can all talk about the celebrities and the wonderful people who've gone across Kokoda, but it's the ordinary Australians, because this story of Kokoda is about ordinary Australians that have done something extraordinary, and that's where the sheer joy for me is. Watching grandmothers and grandfathers do the trek, and you see the strong get weak and you see the weak get stronger. It is just the most incredible story of overcoming hardship, and that's where the joy is for me.
And I tell you what, the bond that's created, Wayne, when you do Kokoda, like I know for a fact that, you know, that first group that I went away with, you know, that corporate group, I still have some of those guys I call really great mates of mine. And then, of course, the second time with my wife, Boof, and my two eldest daughters, and, you know, Macca and her son, you know, and Romper, and, you know, that group there, Shaky, it was like that bond itself, like you form such an incredible bond. How it, like 94 bonds you'd have from your experience. Is there any you just go, can't wait for this to finish, mate, you're a flog? Like, I don't say mine.
No,
but...
I wasn't saying yours, mate. I thought I didn't say it. But look, that's the thing about Kokoda. It becomes very tribal. Any of these events become quite tribal. Like, I could have multiple Kokoda Spirit groups out there, and we could cross paths, and it's like they want to punch on. Like, it's because everyone becomes tribal. You know, become so tight in your own group, and you look at them going like, oh, what do they got? What are they doing? You know, so that is the one great thing. And you don't need to go do Kokoda with a group. We have so many individuals that come together. And that's where the great joy from, once again, the mateship that's formed from Kokoda. Individuals come together to form these incredible tight tribal teams.
So talk about the physical side of things, Wayne. So I'm imagining Kokoda, and I'm thinking that you're staying overnight in some beautiful accommodation, having a spa, getting a massage down on the rub-down table, etc. I'm assuming that's exactly right.
Correct, yeah. That's 5-star Kokoda, mate. That's when you do it by the helicopter. Mate, I have to say, each night, where the great joy is Kokoda is, whilst it's physically challenging, you know, you're climbing up massive big hills and a million, you know, tree roots and rocks and rivers. One day you're crossing 22 rivers and things like that. But you know what? The pain and suffering of a hard day's walk diminishes when you get into camp. You've got the beautiful grass campsite, got this crystal clear streams. You can see the boys have got the fire on, the billies on. You know, you go for a swim, you cool down, you freshen yourself up. Then you sit around with a bunch of newfound mates around the fire, having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, talking about the day, and you look around at the vista of the place, the sheer, you know, greenery of the place, the different colours of green, and looking at the villages, and you're walking into these villages with their thatch roof huts. There's no electricity, there's no running water, there's no power, there's no nothing. But the simple joy of being out in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of nowhere, in a village, and hearing the kids laugh and run around, and it's just magical.
I couldn't agree more. I've been lucky enough to go through Nepal twice, and I agree that. But from a practical perspective, on Kokoda anyway, how many hours a day are you trekking? Because my Nepal days, you started pretty early because it's pretty warm in the mountains, and you're normally done roughly around lunchtime. And then, as you said, you got the whole afternoon just to relax and have a few drinks and, you know, have a chat and yarn with your newfound mates. Is it similar in Kokoda, or you sort of?
Yeah. The difference between Kokoda and an Everest walk, Kokoda is physically tough in the sense that there's not really a defined track. So, you know, when you think of 100 Ks, when we can bang that out in, you know, 5 Ks an hour, whatever, you're probably only walking at 1.5 to 2 Ks an hour because the terrain is so rough. There's so many trees and tree roots and so many rocks and things like that. So the longest walking day is about 8 to 10 hours, and we cover about 15 Ks. That's it.
Yep.
But you get so many rivers and so much mud and that kind of stuff like that. So it's physically different, the walking style. You know, where Nepal is quite defined tracks.
Yep.
In Kokoda it's no Victorian or Queensland National Park here. You know, it is as rough and red as it was, you know, 100 years ago when the track was first formed for the villagers to go across the track. And that's the thing with Kokoda. You know, the track predates the walk, so it's a village track. Yeah, so they're walking from village to village to get things done there. So.
And do you have boarders, mate, that sort of follow behind and do the setup for the camp at the night and cook the food and that sort of stuff? Is that how it sort of rolls?
Yeah, we have the most incredible team of locals of our PNG teams over there, mate. They are absolutely incredible. And you know, that's probably one of the stories that we don't speak enough about is the bond that you will have with your PNG porters and the PNG team there. You know, our trek guides, our carriers, our cooks, our medics. Mate, those guys are just absolute legendary. How they can whip up a meal over an open fire, you know, in the middle of a jungle, consistently, nutritiously, feed you, cook up, you know, wash up after you, all that kind of stuff. Put your tents up, pull your tents down. Mate, it's just an extraordinary story. So, you know, you're really just walking on Kokoda. So Kokoda is a really simple, I keep it quite simple. You know, you get up in the morning, your breakfast is made for you, you walk to morning tea, stop, you walk to lunchtime, then you walk to camp. It's simple that. So people get overawed by when they talk about Kokoda and these big adventures. Oh my God, it's so big, it's so hard, it's so long. You just got to keep things nice and simple, a bit like life. Just break things down, just take one step at a time, get to each point, and then it becomes quite a simple process after that.
Porters in, I remember in Nepal, like we'd be all the flogs. You could tell us we were in our full hiking gear, and we'd have the boots on and weather gear, and you're looking over these porters, so you're literally wearing thongs, carrying 20 kilos.
Yeah.
That's what it's like.
That's the same with the track, mate. Our boys are in bare feet, and they'll have a thong. They won't have two thongs, but one thong. Because one thong for them and one thong for their mate. But you know what? People go, why don't they have shoes? Why don't they have boots and things like that? You do supply boots, you do supply shoes to them. They last half a trek, mate, because they're such beautiful people. They give them to everybody else. So they'll give them to their mates, or they'll give them to the people, or they'll give them to their family in the village, or they'll give them to their wife back in Port Moresby. So, mate, they go out, they've been walking this track barefoot, as their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers did, 78 years ago, mate. It's incredible to watch. But the funny thing is, like, you ask them, like, mate, did you lose your thong? No, mate, I found one.
I remember Wade giving I took a few pairs of shoes over there, some that I trained in, and the first trek I gave them to Ruben, my guide, and I bloody miss him. Awesome bike on. I was so fortunate to have Ruben again second time around, and thank you for arranging that. And I gave him my shoes thinking this would be a bloody treat, and the next day wore them, out of respect for me. The next day his fucking feet were blistered and he was in all sorts of trouble, and I had to tell him, please don't wear them on my behalf, mate.
Absolutely, mate. That's the thing, though. They look at them, they're so grateful, and that is one of the great beauties of it, mate. Like, they have very little, but they're just so grateful for what they have, and they will share it around. So he would have gone eventually, those boots would have ended up with a family member or his mate and things like that. So that's one of the great treats of Kokoda and Papua New Guinea. And look, let's face it, Papua New Guinea cops a fair whack in the press of negative stuff, but the people are beautiful. It's like anywhere in the world, even like in Australia, we've certain people who aren't the best character, but in Papua New Guinea, mate, 95, 96, 97% of the people over there are just wonderful people having a crack, and that's the great thing about this tourism. Once tourism gets going again, able to give them more employment, able to send their kids to school, simple things like that we take for granted here in Australia, So that's why tourism for those people is such an important thing, and so important that we do get back to Papua New Guinea and back on the track as soon as we can.
Have you got any other destinations? You've already said there, obviously Papua New Guinea, Nepal and Kilimanjaro, etc. Have you got anything else on the wish list, mate, that you want to take your treks to next?
Yeah, mate, we're actually operating in New Zealand now. So we've been operating in New Zealand since last year. And because as I was starting to get a little bit older, mate, I was looking at 5-star adventures. So we have this
that's got JT's name all over it.
Mate, we have this walking winery tour, So we do a couple of hours walk in the morning to the first winery, and then we ride our bikes until the fact that we can't ride them anymore. And then we got to put the bikes in the back of the van and we get driven around from winery to winery. And that's in Queenstown, New Zealand. So we also have these incredible adventures in New Zealand as well. We do a lot of kayaking and mountain biking and stay in really good accommodation, things like that. So it's pretty amazing. But my bucket list next year, I'm going to do Island Peak in Nepal, and I'm going to do one of the 7 summits again, Aconcagua, which is nearly 7,000 metres. So COVID's given me the opportunity to dream big again, to refocus on, and these are personal goals. These aren't for the ego or anything like that. It's just about, before I get to the stage where I can't do anything anymore, I want to go and have a real red-hot crack and leave nothing on the table there, leave nothing unsaid, then leave nothing undone. So that's where it is, mate. So we'll continue to develop. We've got these cracking adventures now, because in the Northern Territory, we're doing the Larapinta trek now. For Anzac Day 2021, we've got this amazing trek through the Northern Territory where we start in Darwin, go to Litchfield National Park, and then through Kakadu. Then we go into Arnhem Land with our local guides up there in Arnhem Land and get into the traditional way of the landowners up there, of country up there, and then down from Catherine Gorge and Mataranka and places like that. So, mate, we're developing some fantastic adventures in Australia as well. And up here on the Sunshine Coast, mate, we have some of the most incredible coastal walks. We did an amazing 80K walk from one end of the Sunshine Coast to the other, on coastal tracks and beaches, and it's just absolutely spectacular. now make one of the world's greatest walks. Get online, sunshinecoastadventures.com.au.
Love it.
Sorry, mate, I missed that. What was it?
So it's www.sunshinecoastadventures.com.au, or the other one, wildspiritadventures.com. No AU.
Now, Wayne, it sounds to me, and we haven't met prior to doing the podcast. Obviously, we've done a couple of treks with Donnie. It sounds to me like you live in the dream job, and you found your purpose, and everything's going great. But like, what do you do when you get down? Because you are essentially inspiring so many people on your treks and what you do. But there's times that you can't be up and about all the time. And right now, COVID's been tough for a lot of us. It's taken us away from what we normally do. So aside from doing some training and giving you a chance to dream big, how have you sort of got through this period?
Mate, I have to say, I reckon it's really been a tough 6 months for me, on personal level, on business levels, and on all different levels. But I've been very, very lucky to have had a great bunch of networks of people who have been extraordinary. And all of us are doing it tough in our own way. And I think the thing is, you realise is like, you think, oh, poor me, poor me, poor me. That, there's 7 billion people in the world all suffering, all doing it tough. But for me, it really is staying connected. We're trying to stay connected. We certainly have our massive loads, and I don't stay up all the time. I actually have suffered personally through this COVID thing more than I can ever recall in my life. But for me, there's the visualization. You just visualize. I visualize, and I can see how this ends. So I don't have the answer for the vaccine and things like that, but I mean, I know this will end. But there's moments in time where you cannot see anything ending, but you've just got to get up. You've just got to take that one step and just get through the day. See, and you know what? You've got to acknowledge that you're struggling. You've got to acknowledge that this is tough. You've got to give yourself the space. You've got to give yourself the mental recognition that, I am doing it tough. And so is everyone else doing it tough, but we will get through this, So, yeah, for me, mate, I would be so active. So the thing is, I've actually had to stop and slow down, forced. I would have done 12 adventures by now, so the greatest thing is keeping stuff up and trying to inspire other people around, because it's so easy for things to fall apart. And people do look for people to go, hey, what's going on in the world? Is there going to be an answer to this kind of stuff? And I don't have the answers, but you've just got to go, it's got to get better, So yeah, that's a tough thing, mate. It really is tough. But you've got to acknowledge those low points, and I do. And I've had plenty of them during this. And lucky I've had some really cool people around me, and just get up and keep going, but keep that vision, because the passion, purpose, and significance, and just you'll look back and if you go on my Facebook page and stuff like that, you'll have a look. I said back in March, it's all going to be about character. It's all going to be about integrity, how this all plays out. And you want to be able to look yourself in the mirror every single day, because in the day, I don't have to please anybody else but that guy looking back at me in the mirror. And if that guy in the mirror goes, okay, you're going, okay, mate, you've been a dickhead, you've done this, change that. So it's really important to look yourself in the mirror and not be too caught up in the Instagram world or the Facebook world or anywhere else where people's opinions count. Because you know what people's opinion, you know what's going on in humans' heads underneath that. So be honest to yourself in the day, and just be honest that I'm suffering, be honest that this will end, and keep going and keep the dream alive.
Some great advice and some great tips purely from a business perspective, Wayne. How do you think this is going to pan out for you post, when everything opens up? Do you think it's going to be good for business, that people are going to go, you know what, I really want to get out there and challenge myself? Or is it, shit, everyone's tight for cash and I just can't afford to invest in this at the moment? Where do you sort of see it landing for you?
Yeah, look, for us, we're quite fortunate in the fact, like, we are Kokoda business. Kokoda has always been a niche market, right? And, you can take your family to somewhere for the same price you can go do Kokoda, but it's life-changing. These things are life-changing. These things are empowering. And these are the greatest things that you can do in your life. If you want inspiration, if you want empowerment, places like Kokoda. So I actually see Kokoda will continue to do what Kokoda will continue to do, that kind of stuff. Sure that the people will start doing more caravan holidays, probably in Australia, things like that. But we've been really, really fortunate. This is quite incredible. We've probably taken more than 120 bookings from a business perspective. This is probably unheard of in the tourism business. More than 120 bookings during COVID for Kokoda and other destinations.
Wow. Okay.
People are just waiting to go. waiting for the green light. And we've had very, 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 very few cancellations. We've few people have just gone like, I can't do this. I'm out panicking and that kind of stuff. But let me tell you, anybody who's ever thinking about pulling the pin, Kokoda, Everest Base Camp, Kilimanjaro, on any of these ventures, they are life-changing. They are the greatest thing you're ever going to do in your life, and you're going to come back 10 foot tall and not the same human. So, I see it's difficult at the moment, but it's going to go off. We're going to be in full flow. The difficult I'm going to have, how difficult it's going to get for us, we're going to have to try and hire people like Donnie Elgin to be guides for us. That's how busy it's going to get, mate. So
you're beauty. Things have got to a whole new level when I get a gig as a track leader. So brace yourself for that, mate. The kokodaspirit.com.au will never be the same if I get on board. But what we do need is the likes of JT to move out from his 5-star resort style life. The male model, I would love to see JT get his hands dirty. Mate, where should we go? If we're going to trek with you and do an outside broadcast podcast, it'd be bloody amazing. Where would we do it?
Mate, Kokoda is the place to go. You cannot beat the Kokoda, doing Kokoda. Kokoda is still the ultimate there, or Everest Base Camp or Kilimanjaro, mate. We've got a big bunch of people coming. Look, I know you want to nominate one, mate, but I swore I would never go back to Kilimanjaro again because it's so physically challenging. But every time I'm going back again, we've got another big bunch of guys going to Kilimanjaro next year with me. The Wish You Were Here guys, Connie Canellis and Steve Hunt, those guys are all coming back for another big adventure. We've got a big mob coming to Everest Base Camp next year. But it depends what you want. If you want to be physically challenged, you want to be mentally challenged, you want your spirit uplifted, you want to know one of the most incredible stories in Australia's history, Kokoda is the place to go, mate, because there's no greater story. It is the most iconic story in Australia's history. We talk about Gallipoli being the birth of our nation, but Kokoda is where we came of age. Kokoda is where we fought backs to the wall. As I said earlier on, against a ferocious enemy. We wanted to change our lifestyle, wanted to steal our land and change our future forever. You can't beat those sorts of inspirational stories. Walking in the footsteps of heroes, walking in the footsteps of our brothers, mate. It's
JT.
Life.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking, mate? It's this Kokoda. Has Wayne got you across the line yet? It's all you, mate.
It's funny, honestly, because look, I did Nepal twice, but it was 20 odd years ago. And I think everything Wayne said, I completely agree with. It was life-changing for me. And I still look back, even today, I look back and just think how amazing that experience was. And that sense of awe and pride and all those things that you have when you finish it, because it was physically tough and challenging. And, you never forget that, and the resilience that you build and belief in yourself. So I 100% believe in it. I must admit now, when I'm 48 years old and just getting out of bed some days seems to be a struggle, I always think, shit, physically, would I actually get through it? And then I genuinely look at blokes like you, Don, and Kurt Fernley, and go, shit, if Kurt can crawl it and you can do it on one leg and I've got a bloody sore back or something, what the hell am I whinging about? And I love the way Wayne, broke it down into the small steps. And I think that was sort of similar in Nepal. You go, you know what, don't look at, I've got to trek for 8 hours a day. I've just got to go to morning tea. And when I get to morning tea, we reset, we have a break, and then we just got to get through to lunch. And then, and I think that's the way to do it. So, you've inspired me, Wayne, I must admit.
Mate, get on board, mate. KokodaSpirit.com. Book online. I'm going to do a special deal for you, mate.
Wayne, when he's talked that around, he's done a bit of politician. He's on the fence. He hasn't bloody committed, though. So that's what I'm hearing.
Mate, we've just gone out on one of the most famous podcasts in the world, the GiddyUp Podcast here, mate. He's just committed. We're going to take him across the track. He's coming. Mate, there's no way out of this. So in 2021, mate, we're going to do Kokoda. And you know what? We're going to do it. We're going to go, let's choose August, because August is one of the most incredible battles that ever happened on Kokoda. It's the Battle of Isarava, mate. And to stand there at the Isarava Memorial with the 4 granite pillars of courage, endurance, mateship and sacrifice, and be there almost on the day when Private Bruce Steele Kingsbury was the most gallant human in that battle there, when he was awarded a Victorian Cross and lost his life in the battle. You cannot do anything more special. You cannot stand on more sacred ground in Australia, because back then it was part of our who we were. So, mate, you're in. Commit, yeah, mate. Put it on the line now, mate. We're going.
Bloody good, isn't he, Donnie? He's very.
Hey, he's good. He's good.
Yarn or two, I reckon, on our trek.
Sorry?
How can you tell a good yarn or two on a trek?
Mate, you know what? There's a lot of yarns. There's a lot of yarns to tell, mate. That's one of the amazing stories out there. Is the amount of stories you can tell. And you know what, mate? When you're walking there, you're actually still seeing the fighting pits. So where their boys have actually dug out, you're still finding grenades, you're still finding bullets. And you know when you stop and prop at one of the major battlefields, some of the Australian soldiers and some of the Japanese soldiers that have never been recovered, their spirit's still out there. It is just, you cannot be like, you can talk about the beauty of Nepal and the wonders of climbing Kilimanjaro and the beauty of New Zealand, that kind of stuff. But the raw spiritual energy and physical, achievement of walking Kokoda can't be beaten.
Have you ever done the one in Thailand? I've been struggling to think of the name.
Hellfire.
That's it, Hellfire Pass. Yeah. Have you ever done it?
Yeah, the sections of that you can walk, and then once again, that's an incredible story. But for people that have got, when you talk about Hellfire Pass, that kind of stuff, so those guys came out of Changi prison in Singapore, and some of them were sent down to do the railway down there, and others were sent down to Sandakan and things like that. And when you hear the stories of how they were punished and how they suffered and things like that, it's just extraordinary. So Hellfire Pass, amazing, but Sandakan is you can actually walk the whole way.
Yep.
What's it for these guys, mate?
Well, I'll tell you what, JT, I'm bloody pumped, mate. I'm ready to run through a brick wall just listening to this, bloke. It is exactly why we connected with you, Wayne. I'm so grateful that you've given up some of your time, mate, to join us on the GiddyUp Podcast, a special edition. It's only superstars make it onto the special edition, mate. And
be able to talk to you two guys, right, mate? Like, I just feel like a little kid looking at my idols, going like, "How exciting is this?" It's pretty special.
Well, I tell you what, it is special. And of course, the readings and when I think back about Kokoda, so many times I'm watching TV at home and Buff and I will just see an image and we'll go, what's that remind you of? And it's just, and then of course it leads into a whole new lot of conversations and memories. And it's so bloody significant and relevant in terms of the experience. So I want to say thank you, mate. I know that I thanked you for and certainly post our adventures, but thank you publicly for the amazing work you've done, not just for me and my group, but the 95 plus all the people you've employed, the difference you've made in Papua New Guinea because of your commitment. And of course, thank you on behalf of the Australian soldiers, the people that actually had that fight, and you've taken it on as a personal thing to share their stories. And mate, in my opinion, no one does it better. So we certainly appreciate you. You're a bloody good human.
Thanks, mate. And just finishing up on that, mate, guys, we're all suffering through COVID, but remember these guys, mate, we've been there before. We've had our backs against the wall before. We've had overwhelming odds against us. We've had an enemy that wants to destroy us. And you know what? We've always overcome it, and we'll do that again.
One last question before we wrap this up, Wayne, because I'm intrigued because you've been to Everest Base Camp before. Have you ever been tempted to go to the rest?
Yeah, I've certainly been tempted, but I do have a slight fear of heights.
I'm listening to you.
Yeah, so as you know, the suspension bridges going across, that kind of stuff, certainly squeezes things together for me, and I get a little bit. Look, I don't want to. Yeah, I'd certainly like to do it, but I don't know. It's like every man his dog is doing. Everest. It'd be lovely to say you've stood on the. But you know where I actually want to go, mate? I actually want, and this is the big dream for end of 2021 and 2022. I'm actually going to walk to the South Pole. That's my big dream. That's where I actually really want to be.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. Now, for those, mate, that do want to learn some more, I know we've dropped a couple of websites during the podcast, but where can people go to learn more about what offers, what's available?
Mate, just go on to the KokodaSpirit.com website, so www.kokodaspirit.com, no AU. And look, there's a whole heap of information there. There's a lot of history on there, there's a lot of stories, a lot of testimonials, or get onto the Kokoda Spirit Facebook page. There's a lot of interaction there, a lot of people talking their stories. And, the photos just blow you away. There's a million different photos and stories about Kokoda, So, yeah, get on the KokodaSpirit.com website or the Facebook page there, and just immerse yourself in. And guys, for those, just finishing up too, for those that don't think they can physically do Kokoda, start training. Prepare for it, or grab a book about it, because it is really one of the most iconic stories in Australia's history. And you do yourself a favour and do those boys a favour and learn something about it.
But in wrapping up, I actually did that exact thing. I used the audio book when I was out training, and there is no greater motivation than listening to that as you're cutting a lap. So well done, mate. Bloody loved having you.
Well done, guys. Thank you so much.